The will to live and the will to die. Jim Drake at that time said to me, he said, "Chris, if we don't get out of here by Christmas, we'll both be dead." And that scared the daylights out of me, thinking that there was going to be a termination to all of this, and I didn't like the outcome. Jim Drake died Christmas Day, 1944, and I directly relate that about as his will to die, how powerful that will to die was. My will was a will to live, and because of that, I'm here today.
If you can imagine working so hard for something all your life, and then boom, it's taken away from you. Well, it was like that for this guy. He wanted to be a fighter pilot. It was during World War II. There was an enemy. He was patriotic. That's initially what really attracted me about this story, because the story is about a guy who wanted to become a fighter pilot. He became a fighter pilot, and he was flying, at the time, one of the coolest planes in the sky. It was a derivative of the P-51 Mustang. On his first combat mission, through a weird quirk of bad luck and cruelty, he never even meets the enemy. Instead, he runs out of gas and spends the next 2 years as a prisoner of war. I'd like to introduce you to Chris Morgan of the 311th Fighter Bomber Group, and POW from 1943 to 1945.
I was born in Whitestone, New York. That's Queens County. My father at that time was a policeman in New York City, and my mother was a seamstress. She was the last of 8 children, and she grew up working for her sisters. There's a place called, in New York, Floyd Bennett Field, was a famous airfield like Roosevelt Field and Mitchell Field. All those were out in Long Island. And we used to go, as recreation, we used to go out and watch airplanes, watch them fly. And I can remember there's a plane called the GB Sportster. It was a fantastic airplane. And that was the first love that I had for an airplane, was the GB Sportster. And then the military planes from Mitchell Field. I can still visually see them flying in formation, and
The drone.
yeah, it's unbelievable. But that was an influence that stayed with me, and is still with me. On Pearl Harbor Day, I was with my buddies Dick Clark and Harry O'Neill and Fred Kroll and Clyde Baird. 5 of us were standing out in front of a soda shop in Yonkers we used to call it the Dutchman's. The name of the place was Cars and Schultz. It was but we called it the Dutchman's. And that's where we heard about Pearl Harbor. The 5 of us were standing outside, and somebody came up to us and said, "Did you hear?" And then they told us about Pearl Harbor. So we immediately all wanted to enlist, and everybody selected the Air Corps. We all wanted to be pilots. And fortunately or unfortunately, I was the only one that got through flight school. The others had either physical impairments or something else that precluded them from going through flying school. So I did get through. And I had an English instructor at that time, believe it or not. He was a pilot in the Battle of Britain, and they gave him a cushion job of coming over here and being an instructor to American pilots. Doug Wakefield, his name was. But in any event, we had very good instruction. And then we went to advance. We got back in the Army, and that was, I had an Army first lieutenant. I'd have even forgotten his name. That was my instructor there. So that the entire program had comprised of 200 hours in the air, and that was brought up through the primary, basic, and advanced training. I graduated in March of '43. I went into a single-engine advance at Marianna, Florida here. I was 19 years old. I didn't want to be, the casualty figures coming out of Europe were horrendous. The 8th Air Force was taking a terrible beating over there. They'd send, believe me, 17 airplanes up and one comes back. 10 men on each airplane. Now, that worried me, or was a challenge to me in the fact that I didn't want to have that responsibility. I didn't want 10 men to be responsible for the lives of 10 men. So that's why I went into single engine. I had the privilege of electing either single engine or multi-engine. And I selected single engine because of what was happening in Europe. And I thought, well, if I go down, I'm going to just go down myself. I won't be taking 10 guys with me. And that's a big responsibility.